Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tuesday Night Luke Live Online. I'm Father James DiLuzio. You find me in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm attending the National Workshop for Christian Unity, where you find members of clergy and religious leaders from Catholic, Episcopal, Lutheran, Methodist, and even a couple of evangelicals to talk about how we can promote in this country of ours a sense of unity and solidarity among all Christian denominations. It's been quite eventful so far. I'm enjoying many different talks. We had a beautiful prayer service offered by the Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church of America, this morning, and some wonderful speakers. I also attended an event updating us on many things that the Catholic Bishops, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, is doing in representing us to foster friendships with all of the denominations that I just mentioned, but also, importantly, with our Jewish brothers and sisters and Muslim community as well. Now, tonight we're going to go into Luke chapter 22, which is the beginning of the climax of Jesus' life and ministry, also known as the Passion narrative, that begins, as you will hear, chapter 22 in the first few verses, the plans of Judas to betray Jesus, and then we'll go next time right into the Last Supper. So, here it's a very brief pericope, but an important one, and I'll offer you some commentary as well. Luke chapter 22. The day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that is called the Passover, was drawing near, and the chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, the one surnamed Iscariot, and counted among the 12. And he went to the chief priests and the temple guards to discuss a way of handing Jesus over to them. They were pleased and agreed to pay him money. Then Judas discussed with them a way of handing him over in the absence of a crowd. We begin the Passion with betrayal, or the plan for betrayal, and we often wonder why. Why did it all have to happen this way? I think on a very fundamental level, it was clear that only a portion of people were really getting Jesus, were really understanding Jesus, and even those who understood it were very, very aware of all the antagonism against Jesus and against the way. Very natural human antagonisms when we'd rather just stay on our comfort level, when we don't want to be challenged, fears that society may change, and a host of other things. So I believe that God inspired Jesus to allow the antagonism to come to its, what we would call its greatest level, except death, to expose all that humanity is capable of in terms of evil, in terms of its traps and entanglements and temptations, in order to expose it and then ultimately to forgive it, which is the only way out of all human frailties and selfishness and fears and greed and everything else. And then, of course, to use this as the opportunity to inaugurate the resurrection, a pretty strong belief in Judaism at the time, and one that is in part of the hope and prayer of many religions of the world, something I think that's primordial in the primeval man and woman longing in our hearts to sort of consecrate ourselves to a purpose greater than ourselves, and a life that is even beyond the grave. So with that said, we look at again why the necessity of one of the 12. Obviously, Judas had free will, and then we have many commentaries to see him not as diabolical and evil, even though Luke and the others tell us Satan entered into Judas. Why was he so prone? Because he had, again, a consensus. He had a desire for Jesus to fit his image and his desire of what he thought Messiah would be, and whether he expected Jesus then, in the crisis of being arrested, to then use all his power and might to show God's glory. Of course, we don't know, but that's one of the very likely rationales for Judas's motivation. But again, the devil is in charge of illusions, and here we find, of course, someone confronting a very deep illusion that God uses his power to manipulate and convince, rather than God choosing to have solidarity with humanity to help us make proper choices in the midst of life's joys and sorrows through life and death and resurrection. The other thing I think that is very important, and I start this out, you may recall when we started the very beginning and the birth of Jesus, that everything about Jesus' life is meant to tell us about our own, to understand the human condition and the reality of life and human choices and good and evil. And I think that one of the 12 betrayed Jesus is identifying that for many of us, if not all people, at some point can have deep feelings of or find ourselves in situations where we are betrayed. We feel betrayed by others who we think they understand us, but they don't, or who we have a deep friendship and a sense of real reciprocity and solidarity, and suddenly we find, no, we don't. They have different thoughts about us we didn't even know, or we don't impress people the way we think, and how disappointing that is when we find that we don't. These are very universal dynamics, and as I said, part of the plan of God in becoming fully human in Christ is to engage in everything that's human, to show us that we're not alone and that we have God above all who's supporting us through this, and also fellow human beings who, if we're truthful, can acknowledge, empathize, and find alternatives to the hurt and the pain that we are experiencing, that we're never alone in it. So those are my comments for the beginning of Jesus's passion story, Luke 22, and the betrayal of Jesus. Please feel free to write your comments and ideas. Next week I will be back in New York, and I'll share a little more of the insights I'm gaining from this National Week for Christian Unity. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Have a good night. God bless.